It was a stormy night when Jenna pulled into the gas station. Her old sedan, sputtering and gasping for breath, had barely made it off the highway. The rain beat heavily on the roof, and the wind howled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony that seemed to echo in the desolate landscape. The gas station was isolated, a relic from a bygone era. Flickering neon lights struggled to cast a faint glow over the cracked pavement. The single, rusted pump stood forlornly beneath a leaky awning. A faded sign proclaimed that it was open 24 hours, though it looked like it hadn't seen a customer in years. Jenna, shivering from the cold and nerves, got out of her car and approached the pump. The rain had turned the area into a muddy mess, but she didn't care. She just wanted to get back on the road. As she fumbled with the nozzle, she noticed the station's old convenience store. Its lights were dim, but she could make out the outlines of dusty shelves through the grimy windows. The storm seemed to intensify, the wind howling louder and the rain lashing harder. Jenna was about to return to her car when she heard a sudden, loud thud coming from the store. Startled, she turned to see the door of the convenience store slowly creaking open, as if beckoning her inside. Curiosity and desperation got the better of her. Maybe she could find a phone or at least a warm place to wait out the storm. She approached the store, pushing open the door, which emitted a low, mournful groan. The inside was even creepier than she had imagined. The fluorescent lights flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls filled with outdated snacks and dusty bottles. Jenna walked further in, her footsteps echoing through the empty aisles. The only sound was the rain pounding against the roof and the occasional creak of the old building. She called out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" But the only response was the hollow sound of her own voice. Suddenly, the store's lights went out, plunging Jenna into darkness. Her heart raced as she fumbled for her phone, but it was dead, no surprise given the storm. She could just make out a faint glow coming from the back room, so she decided to investigate. The back room was cluttered with old, broken-down machinery and boxes of expired goods. As she stepped inside, she heard the sound of something, or someone, moving behind her. She spun around, but there was no one there. The tension was unbearable, and the air grew colder. Jenna's breath misted in the chill as she saw something strange in the corner of her eye, a shadow moving quickly past the window. She moved cautiously towards it, only to find the glass covered in grime, obscuring her view. She turned back to the store and noticed a figure standing in the aisle, barely visible through the shadows. It was an old man, his face gaunt and his eyes hollow. He was dressed in ragged clothes that looked decades old. He held a lantern, its flickering light casting a sinister glow. Jenna felt a shiver of dread as the man spoke in a raspy voice, "You shouldn't be here." Before she could respond, the lights flickered back on. The man was gone. The store seemed to be exactly as it was before, but Jenna felt an intense sense of unease. She hurriedly grabbed her keys and rushed back to her car, determined to leave this place behind. As she started her engine, the car made a wheezing sound, and the lights flickered. Jenna glanced back at the store. The old man was now standing at the edge of the forecourt, watching her with those hollow eyes. She drove away as fast as she could, rain pelting against the windshield and lightning illuminating the road ahead. Jenna never found out what really happened at that gas station. She only knew that she was lucky to escape. For years afterward, she avoided that highway, but the memory of the stormy night and the eerie gas station haunted her dreams. Some say that gas station is a place where time stands still, where lost souls come to rest. Others whisper that it's a portal to something far darker. But Jenna knew one thing for sure: she had no intention of ever returning to find out. Jessica had booked a quaint cabin nestled deep in the woods for a weekend getaway with her boyfriend, Alex. Excited to disconnect from the city, they arrived just before sunset. The host, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, greeted them warmly and handed over the keys with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. As night fell, strange things began to happen. They heard footsteps outside the cabin but found no one when they looked. The lights flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Jessica attributed it to the old wiring, but Alex was uneasy. Around midnight, they heard a knock at the door. Jessica peered through the peephole to see Mr. Thompson standing outside, holding a lantern. He claimed he was checking on them and offered them fresh towels. Alex declined politely, but Sarah noticed Mr. Thompson's eyes lingering on her. Unable to shake off the feeling of unease, they decided to leave early the next morning. But when Sarah went to return the keys, Mr. Thompson was nowhere to be found. They left the keys on the kitchen counter and hurried to their car. As they drove away, relief washed over them. But suddenly, Alex exclaimed, "Look back." In the rearview mirror, they saw the cabin engulfed in flames. Shocked, they pulled over and called 911. Later, the police investigation uncovered a chilling truth. Mr. Thompson had been impersonating the real Airbnb host, who was out of town. He had set up the cabin with hidden cameras and intended to harm Sarah. The knock on the door was a ploy to get inside. They never found Mr. Thompson, and the real host was devastated by the violation of his property. Sarah and Alex were left traumatized, realizing they narrowly escaped a nightmarish fate in the secluded cabin in the woods. In a quiet town, St. Mary's Hospital stood at the edge, its old bricks weathered by time. The locals whispered about strange happenings there, patients who checked in but never checked out, and eerie lights seen flickering in the windows at night. Nurse Sarah had worked at St. Mary's for years. She was used to the creaking floors and the dimly lit corridors that always seemed colder than the rest of the hospital. But one night, things took a turn. It was the graveyard shift, quiet and still. Sarah was making her rounds when she heard footsteps echoing down an empty hallway. She turned, expecting to see a colleague, but the hallway was empty. Goosebumps prickled her skin as she continued, trying to shake off the feeling of being watched. As she passed room 312, she heard a child's laughter, a sound so out of place in the silent hospital that it sent a shiver down her spine. Sarah hesitated but finally pushed open the door. The room was dark except for the glow of monitors. There, in the corner, stood a little girl in a hospital gown, her eyes wide and staring. "Are you lost?" Sarah asked softly, her voice trembling slightly. The girl didn't respond, just stared with an unsettling intensity. Sarah stepped closer, reaching out a hand. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance around them. The girl's gaze shifted, her eyes now fixed on something behind Sarah. A chill swept through the room as Sarah turned slowly. Standing in the doorway was a figure in old-fashioned hospital attire, its face obscured in shadows. Sarah's heart raced as she backed away, her mind racing with fear. The figure moved closer, its presence heavy and oppressive. She stumbled backward, her breath coming in ragged gasps, until finally, she turned and ran. She sprinted down the hall, the sound of footsteps echoing behind her. Panic gripped her as she reached the nurse's station, where she found her colleagues staring at her with concern. "What's wrong, Sarah?" one of them asked, reaching out to steady her. Sarah tried to speak, to explain what she had seen, but the words caught in her throat. She glanced back down the hallway, but there was no sign of the figure or the little girl. From that night on, Sarah avoided room 312 and never worked another graveyard shift alone. but the memory of that chilling encounter stayed with her, a reminder that some things are best left undisturbed in the quiet halls of St. Mary's Hospital.